I'm delighted to welcome another man I've had the privilege of interviewing on site. This is Paul Doherty, Procurement Director at Heathrow Airport. And we're talking the value we seek. A warm welcome for Paul, please.
Good afternoon. Lovely to see you all, and thank you to Supply Chain and Digital Life for inviting us to come and speak today. I procure what is effectively a city of services at the busiest airport in the UK. We operate across all sorts of disciplines, from infrastructure build to technology, through to all the operational contracts that keep our airport moving on a daily basis. And what I wanted to do today was come and speak to you about some of the things that we're looking about and thinking about as a procurement function, so you can get a bit of an insight into what's going through our mind at the moment. And it's really important with that kind of portfolio that we understand very clearly the value that our business is seeking when we come out to the market. Now, as procurement professionals, I thought I'd start with a hypothesis today, and our hypothesis is that we make the most reliable life partners. We guarantee happiness as procurement people. A bold claim. You'll notice that there's nothing about romance or any other overtures you could link to that statement, but I will see if I can't back it up at the end of the presentation. The way we look at things is a procurement cycle. And again, we look at the relationships that we build with our supply chain, again, kind of akin to the relationships you build in life in terms of making sure that you make the right selections, making sure that you find the time to talk and spend with each other. We look at certain key things. Qualifying value criteria is something that we look at that's really important and growing in importance. And if you really want to have a look at it, the last time I spoke here, we talked about how the procurement world had grown from certain key fundamental aspects to broader ones. It's no longer just good enough to have the best bid. We need to make sure that we have companies aligned to our sustainability objectives, who will be cyber safe, who will cooperate with us in certain key moments, that we can collaborate with and work with, and that have our reputation and their reputation centre of their mind. We make sure that when we go to sourcing, we understand those really key aspects of value, so that across that graphic equalizer of all those different services that we buy, we're shaping the value that we seek right for the category or the market that we're in. When we look at negotiations or extending contracts, we make sure that that isn't just an incumbent supplier continuing, but we keep it refreshed. We keep the company's vision, the company's values at the forefront of our mind. And finding the right time to talk with the right people about the right things is a really, really key aspect to myself and my procurement team. So all of those things that we achieved in sourcing, in qualifying criteria and commitments that people make, we make sure that we tie all of those into a supplier relationship management process that runs throughout the course. And again, we look at our supplier relationships dependent on the status of relationship we seek with that supplier. Supplier relationships are very different with my baggage provider at Heathrow than they are with my stationery provider at Heathrow. We then do supplier assurance. We make sure that the things that people said they're doing, and that goes two ways, that we make sure that the constraints we promised wouldn't be there aren't there, and therefore we're being fair and equitable in our relationship. And one of the things that we're really working towards is, rather than coming to the end of a contract's life cycle and working out in a moment whether or not we want to continue talking to that supplier about continuation or whether we want to go to the market, we're using all of the data through that life cycle to say, have we got a supplier who is sustainable, who is value for money, who lives up to some of the core objectives and values that we hold, and have they done a good job while they've been here? If you've got that supplier or that person in your life, why would you look to go back to the market? Why wouldn't you continue and look to seek the value that you've already got on your doorstep? So that's the procurement cycle that we go through. And I kind of touched a little bit before on the procurement evolution. So again, previously we always talked about cost, time, quality. And when I was younger and sharper hair, that was the key thing that was my end of year appraisal. Did you manage to get those key things attained? That's definitely grown now. And as we go out to the market and we look at different things, we've got to make sure that health, safety and well-being is as intrinsic in our supply chain as it is to us. We're an on-site business. We're a dangerous business. We're a business that operates in an airfield. We have to make sure that those standards are upheld. We've got to make sure we're sustainable. If we want to grow as an airport and achieve our ambitions, there's no way that we won't do so without a really good ESG agenda. And collaboration and standards. It's a demand to work at an airport. There are some pretty stringent standards that you need to be able to stand up to. Knowing early in a process that a supplier can deliver against those is really key. But in exchange, we absolutely prioritize the relationships we want to build with those suppliers. We want to make sure that we own our data and that we understand our supply chain through our data, and that we find that time to catch up, to talk, to stay on top of performance. And importantly, that we've got the right tools and processes in place to make sure that that happens. And that definitely speaks nowadays to the digital agenda. But one of the things that emerged actually through doing a sustainability exercise called the Balanced Scorecard, which I spoke about last time, which I won't talk about too much on this one, was that the Balanced Scorecard taught us as a sustainability tool to go out and find out what was important to us as a business. What are the things that our business asks for that we need to make sure our supply chain is turned onto and tuned into? We then extrapolated that across everything and said, well, what does the business ask for? What do we go out and speak to around value? What does my engineering director talk about when he goes and speaks to people? What does my infrastructure director, what does my technology director, what do my strategy teams go out and speak about? What do the people who speak to government talk about? And if I was to put all of those requirements into one place, how expensive is my supply chain going to be? Because it is a raft of things. And which ones are important in which areas? So in procurement and across my team, we focus on three key elements. We understand the value that the business wants, we understand the service that we as procurement offer, and we know the end in mind. What are the results that we're looking to achieve as a result of doing it? And we do that against a company vision. Heathrow's purpose is to make every journey better, and that's a good existential thing for us to link to and have as a strapline. But our new company vision is something that our supply chain can attach to, can see. We want to build an extraordinary airport that's fit for the future. That talks to all sorts of things in terms of sustainability, in terms of digital. It talks about the service proposition that we want to offer. And in order to do that, we want to make sure that we've got a capable, ambitious and proactive supply chain that's equally passionate about that agenda. I don't know if any of you work or provide services at the airport, but it's definitely true that when we speak to our supply chain, they're as passionate about the infrastructure as we are. There is something about Heathrow and working at Heathrow that it doesn't matter about us as an organisation, people want to be a part of. We break that vision down into beacons, and beacons is a wonderful airfield expression about things that guide our aircraft, which works when you're talking about strategy and purpose. We want to create winning teams that are fast and focused and less constrained, that seek value for our customers, and that's not just passengers, but is very, very importantly passengers. We want to do that by embracing a digital future and digitalising the airport in a sustainable way that enhances people and planet, whilst creating capacity for future growth. So those are the values that flow through our beacons. And in procurement, we've gone into each one of those and understood, well, if you took each of those areas, what are the key things we need to be talking to a supply chain about? And that's then how we build the platform for value, so that everything we do, a supply chain can see their contribution in relation to our company strategy. Now, when I started in the role a few years ago, we couldn't do that. And one of the first things I wanted to do was a value definition. There were certain foundations and fundamentals that we had to have in place in order to do it. There's no point in having a value definition if you don't understand the data, because you're not going to get measurable results at the end of it. So we needed to improve our data. Our supplier relationship management process was good, but it was very bespoke. It really depended on the category manager who was running it. And actually, it worked for our supply chain. It didn't work as much for us. We needed to take the agenda back more and start holding things up in those meetings. And one of the things I love about our new supplier relationship meetings is we look at, same as you would have with your employer, we set objectives at the beginning of the year that may not be the objectives of the contract. It might be the 2 things or the 3 things that we as businesses want to achieve, and then at the end of the year we assess whether we got there and how we did against our objectives. Great for us, we get additional value from our contract, not going to lie. Great for a supplier, because every year they can turn around and say, that was what was important to you, and this is what we did about it. So again, making sure that we've got a really good 2-way street. We needed to make sure we had a better proposition for small and medium-sized enterprises, and I'm delighted to say, as one I'm really passionate about, we are currently well above our targets in SME engagement, but there is still a long way to go in terms of making the airport more accessible, making working at the airport less of an investment for those companies. And we didn't have a window into sustainability. We didn't have a way of saying how different suppliers were performing against sustainability, so we created a balanced scorecard. And the balanced scorecard measures all sorts of areas of our ESG agenda, but it gives them the ability to accredit, to promote, to get credit for what they're doing, not only internally but externally. So an important piece of branding. We also spent some time understanding who are we as procurement, what's the service that we offer. And I'm not going to go hugely into all of the details on this slide, but making sure we've got great data insight, making sure our strategies stand up, making sure we've got the tools for our people to thrive and be successful, making sure our supplier and our stakeholder engagement's on point. Those are all really, really important things, but the underpinning piece of people, of sustainability, of data, are really the key ones that we couldn't progress until we had. Making sure that our people feel that they're being developed, that they're in the right place, that they've got the opportunity to make a difference was really, really key. The other thing that we spent time doing before we could look at value was segmenting our supply chain, and I'm delighted to have seen quite a few of the stands out there talking about supplier segmentation. We spent a long time doing this, and we have now digitalized the entire supplier estate at Heathrow to understand segmentation, all of the different areas of reporting for the supply chain against the obligations in their contract, so that when we sit in those supplier relationship meetings, we're able to sit and have a conversation about exactly what they are doing and exactly what they're not doing, and how we can work on that together. And interestingly, when our data started, we had about 360, 400 suppliers sitting in the not yet classified. We also had about 100 strategic suppliers, which if any of you have operated something like this, is absolutely impossible to manage. We've now got our data in shape. And yes, we are trying to find who that one not yet classified is, but I wasn't going to come and put a 0 on it and fib to you. There is one supplier at the moment currently who is not classified. But understanding the relationships we have at those different levels is really key. Our strategic suppliers are trusted with some of our most inherent processes, our baggage, our air traffic control, our buses, our people who greet people onto the terminals and look after them, our people who greet people who need additional support and additional needs. These are really, really key aspects and services, and they're the people that if something goes wrong, we need to get into a room and sit down and support them. Critical suppliers, really, really important, but at the end of the day, we don't spend time on site together regularly. We don't sit in rooms and solve problems together regularly. They provide an asset, a good or a service that's important to us. So now that we understood those things, we're able to say that we've got an appreciation of the value that we seek, the service that we operate, and the results that we're going after. And again, I'm not going to spend too much time on the results that we're after for time in this session. But having those things aligned was the Holy Trinity, and that gave us the opportunity to now really push into looking at how do we attain that value, how do we push into that value, and how do we flow it through that horseshoe of procurement activity. The first element in that, so our qualifying value criteria, is something that's really key because everyone talks about barriers to entry as a negative thing, quite rightly so. More often than not they are, but sometimes they can be a positive. There's very little point in a supplier who can't perform to certain obligations or meet certain obligations being onboarded into your supply chain because it's not going to work for them and it's not going to work for you. So we make sure that in a very proportionate way, we apply our qualifying value criteria. At the very upper level, our strategic suppliers, we assess health and safety and well-being culture. We assess lost time frequency injuries. And we have a charter around openness and communication. On sustainability, you'll complete and do the balanced scorecard. You'll continue to seek ways to progress yourself against the scorecard. You've read our standards and you understand them and you can comply to them. Reputationally, we do reputational checks to make sure that there's nothing in this that's going to immediately cause this relationship issues. And equally, we look forward. What could happen that could do that, and how do we manage it, and how do we want to manage it together? And then we also do something around collaboration and service. If you work at the airport, our passengers are the key things. It doesn't matter whether you're a builder or a service agent. If a passenger asks you for help, nodding and shrugging and walking past is Heathrow's reputation. So we make sure that everyone who works at the airport is trained in our service signatures and understands how to work with passengers. Now we look at those as we go through the segments of our supply chain. So we look at those for our strategic partners, and then we reduce them for our critical, and as we go down, they become less and less onerous and demanding. But one of the key things that we do in all of that is that we make sure we're building the capability of the supply chain. So this isn't a, I'm sorry you didn't hit the bar, you're not coming in type conversation. For a lot of this, it's we ask the question, we're looking for supply chain to be honest and open with us, because if you don't, we'll find you out in the RFP anyway, so you might as well. But we look at things like discretionary passes. So you can't currently report your carbon footprint. Are you willing to work with us over the next 9 months for us to help you get the capability to do so? Yes, great. That would be an obligation in your contract, and it will be a key one. But if you're willing to do so, then we're happy to take you through to RFP. So we make sure that for all of my stakeholders and all of the people in my business, we're buying a supply chain that matches the company strategy, the company visions, and the company's kind of core and base requirements. And what that led us to is the notional supplier. So we took all of those beacons and we sat down as a procurement function, and I interviewed all of the directors within my business and all of my executive, and I took them through each one and I said, what do you want when you're talking about winning team from a supply chain? What are the things that you're looking for? What's critical to have? What's nice to have? What's non-negotiable to have? And we went through all of that. And like any relationship, it set us off on a journey for the most unrealistic supplier you're never going to find anywhere in your life. No one can deliver all of those things. It's impossible. And we've all met someone in our life who's doing that in their own personal lives. This person does not exist. You need to work out your sacrifices and your compromises. So what does that mean? So for us, what it means is once you've come through that initial qualification to say you're ready to be considered as a supplier, how do we dial up and dial down the notional supplier to understand, well, do you know what? If we're going to bring in someone who's laying our runways, which we're doing at the moment, people and planet's really important because that's a lot of concrete. So we've got to make sure we've got a really good story. If we're working with consultancies, we really want to focus on winning team. We really want to make sure that you're bringing the talent through your team, and actually when you bring them in, we're developing them when they come to the airport as well. So when we talk about moving into the next phases and things like RFPs and competitions, we're looking at this now, and this is something that we're currently working on, to tailor it so that no RFP is asking for everything, but those RFPs are driven by the value statements that the business has said that they want. We then used artificial intelligence. Very exciting. So we took the aspects that we break down for procurement, and we asked it to do a word cloud based on this huge document that we have written. And you can just see some of the words that jump out, and I'm not going to go into the word clouds too much. You can have a look at those for yourselves. But I will talk about a little bit the things that jumped out in terms of value that we seek, because actually I think if you go across lots of major clients at the moment, these are the things that, from speaking to other major clients, they're looking for as well. Alignment to our values. We have values as a business. We want to make sure that we have a business that we're working with that works to values, that has values as its centre. We want to make sure that we've done those reputational assessments to make sure that we don't have any shocks in the system, and we know how we would manage shocks in the system. When we look at digital future, cyber is obviously the key thing, especially at an airport. If there's one thing that keeps us up at night, it is cyber at the moment. But also that businesses who come to us, who have custodian of our data, have a data strategy, have transparency in mind, are open with their data. That they're focused on customer experience, that we're using digital to unhinge a better customer experience, and that ultimately, as an asset-driven business, we're using it to improve the performance and knowledge of our assets. Winning team. If any of you have worked at Heathrow, you'll know how much health, safety and well-being comes into every single conversation in everything that we do. But also things like collaboration, ethics and service. You know, it's great that you do ED&I training, but who in your business has been through it? How often do you refresh it? How often do you train it? What are the things you've actually done as a result of it? Do you do the training, but all of your recruitment processes are exactly as they were before? That's just a training course. That's nothing. So again, making sure that they follow that through. And talent and integrated teams. Can your team come and work with our team? Can we sit in a room and get on together? And again, we use things like behavioural assessments to look at that. Value for our customers. Safe and secure is the first value most customers want. During COVID, the key thing people wanted to do was see cleaners in an airport. That's what they wanted. Everyone wanted to see cleaners, so we made sure that they were bright and visible and in the right places. We also made sure they were cleaning, by the way, which was equally important. Passenger experience, making sure that everything we do is trying to make more frictionless the passenger experience. And our next generation security product, which we're rolling out at the moment, is for those who've travelled recently and used it, a fantastic opportunity and experience to really push that forward. And we want to be the operator of choice. And that's for our airlines as much as it is for our passengers. We want airlines to want to fly from Heathrow. Our ESG agenda is transferred through our balanced scorecard. Carbon reduction speaks for itself. We have all sorts of elements of social value, and that also reaches into our SME agenda. We also have a focus on waste and natural resources and have recently made some commitments through the Construction Leadership Council for steel, concrete and diesel removal to make sure that we're leading in that area and thriving local economy, that we're paying back to the environment that we're in. And again, I won't go through all of them in the interest of time, but fast and focused is making sure that we're removing the constraints, that we collaborate well together and that we're getting the best expertise that we can from the market. And then capacity is the one that we're all ridiculously giddy and excited about at Heathrow because it's just come back on the agenda and we're now looking at long-term growth again and what that can mean for us. But it's about making sure that we're building safe, future-proofed infrastructure. So that's our company strategy on a page and how it works, our values, the foundations, the things that are non-negotiable, our beacons and our vision. And in procurement, it was important that we can map to all of that. So our values we do through behavioural assessments, our foundations we do through our qualifying value criteria, the beacons are achieved through our value definition, and all those things together push a supply chain to help us to achieve our vision. So, back to our hypothesis. Well, if everyone is assessing what their non-negotiables are, do they make you feel safe? Do they make you feel secure? Are they looking after your vulnerabilities? If everyone, when they go out to source, is picking the best one in competition, and tastes differ, dependent on different areas. Negotiations, what are the sacrifices that we're willing to make? How are we going to make this work? What are the things and what are the tradables? Performance, we'll keep it clean, but how's the relationship going? Are we buying flowers for each other, or are we going and bad-mouthing each other outside the back and this isn't really going so well? And are we doing what we said we would do for each other? Are we honouring our relationship? And of course, as any relationship, you then have the choice as to whether you go back to the market or whether you stay with the person that you're with. Thank you for listening. I hope that was interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. And I would say, as a journalist, when I came to visit you at the airport to do a story, most of us, when we go through an airport, we are focused on us, getting A to B with the minimum fuss. When you actually go there and view it through a different lens, through the lens of the airport, and as you describe it as a city of services, it's quite extraordinary when you view. I can't go through an airport in the same way now. You have changed my life because you're looking around and thinking there are so many wheels working within wheels, and how did that get there? And it's fascinating. And my partner really didn't enjoy it last time I went through an airport with her.
My partner never does enjoy it.
I was telling her all kinds of things. Anyway, genuinely a fascinating experience. Any questions for Paul before we look to move to our first networking break? Do we have anything immediate? One thing I would say, as you're saying, you're moving into that growth area now, that growth of capacity. Does that put extra pressures on you? What extra pressures does it put on the whole procurement system? Because it's changing gear very much.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, because we're in such an early phase, not so much. We treat it almost like a program, like we do any of our other programs, and we're mobilizing it. Having been involved in the previous expansion run that we went on, it does change the mindset. It's such a huge endeavor. It's such a different thing. And it's almost akin to building an airport. But it's all about, and it drives the thought of how do you bring that expertise in from the market? What do you have in-house? And what do you need to go and get from external? And again, there are some incredibly experienced people now when it comes to airports and expanding airports and driving capacity for all of the work that's going on globally. The key consideration is how do you get that talent to the UK and to Heathrow, which is a difficult one because there's a lot of competition out there that's very attractive as well. But bringing the right talent in is the real key.
Absolutely. And if you allow me a shameless plug, if you do want to find out more about the, I try and remember the title we used, was it Procurement Progression in a City of Services? I think it was.
Might have been.
I was quite proud of that headline. Just search that, you'll find far more in the magazine about Paul and the work he does. So a warm thank you for Paul. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll now have a short networking break, and we'll be back in here at around 10 to the hour. Thank you.